Hi chaps, and welcome to lesson 1 of our lockdown video series. This is how I'm going to be teaching you for the next few weeks, or at least until we get back to school. They're going to run very similar to how we would in a lesson, so I'm going to be leading it. I'm going to be explaining all the topics that we have not done so far on the course, bit by bit each lesson. Throughout these videos there's going to be some small tasks for you to complete. You need to be taking notes, and there'll also be some exam questions that you'll be doing during the videos and for homework. At the end of each lesson I'll ask you to submit your work via email, so it's either a picture or electronically via email, or I've uploaded everything to an assignment on Teams, so our brand new paper 1 and paper 2 work booklets, and you can fill it out on there and let me know via email that you've completed the work on there, and I can mark it there as well. Right chaps, what will you need for these lessons? First of all, pen and paper. This is so you can take notes throughout the lesson and take part in some of the tasks I'm going to be asking you to do. Some I'll be asking you to think about, some I'll be asking you to write down, maybe draw a table that's on the screen, and others will be exam questions that I'll expect you to be attempting. Throughout all the lessons you need to be taking notes and you need to be taking part in the tasks. You will also need your paper 1 and paper 2 work booklets. These are new booklets that we have produced, and I've sent you them via email. They're going to be available and show my homework, and they're going to be available for you to attempt on Teams as an assignment. You may also need your paper 1 or paper 2 Bibles. They're not necessary for the lesson, but they might be helpful when you're thinking about some of the tasks. And then you may also need some of your GCSE revision note sheets, or the lesson note sheets that we have used in the past when I'm going through some of the older content. At the end of the lesson, I would expect you to be submitting your work to me via email or via Teams, whether it's the exam questions I've asked you to do or the lesson notes. It's quite a simple process. You need to take a photo of your work and send it to me via email if that's the way you're going to do it, or you need to attempt the exam questions on the assignments on Teams, and I will mark it there and then. Right, let's get on with the main part of the lesson. Right, so today's first lesson is going to be on altitude, but we're just going to start with a little recap task of some of the stuff that I've been setting you on Everlearner. So on your screen you've got 2 quick tasks. I would like the 6 functions of the skeleton. That's all it needs, doesn't need any linking words. And I would also like the 3 major blood vessels, but just add in a couple of characteristics of that as well, or of them as well. I'm going to give you 1 minute to do that task. Let's go. So the 6 different functions of the skeleton, and then when you get over to the blood vessels, 3 major blood vessels that we talk about, as well as the different characteristics that you would associate. Try not to use direct opposites if you can help it. Obviously there are direct opposites, but try to think of all the different things and the key characteristics that make them different from each other. Okay? Right, so you've had 30 seconds so far. I'll start putting a few pointers for you on the screen. All right, just in case you're struggling very, very slightly. Okay, so I'll just put a few first letters in there. I'm going to put P/S on this one here. All right, we call it 2 different things, and then there is also an S at the bottom. And then I'll add in some just for the blood vessels as well, just in case you're struggling. I hope you're not, but if you are, it's not a problem. Okay, so that is a minute. Let's see if we've got them correct. So number 1 should have had, or in any order, whatever order you've got them in, it's not a problem. Right, but you should have protection, then movement, mineral storage, blood cell production, I'll just put pro. Here you could have had points of attachment. I'll just put points of ATT, or structural shape, so S shape. And then down here, support, So that's our 6 functions of the skeleton. If we then go over to the blood vessels, all right, so should have had arteries to start, followed by veins, followed by capillaries, and then if we went for functions, just be really quite simple here. All right, so high pressure, I'm just going to put high P, high pressure, small lumen, away from the heart, veins. We're going to try not to do all direct opposites. All right, so first one for veins should be valves, right, then followed by towards the heart, low pressure, and you could also have had their large lumen. There are others, but those are the ones we're focusing on today. And then capillaries, in terms of just a quick recap, so 1 cell thick and diffusion. You could also have in there, helps with taking away waste products. Okay, let's go on to our second task now then. All right, so another recap. I have not set you this work on Everlearner. All right, but it is something I want you to start trying to think about as we move through the next couple of topics. These are the topics that we just finished on before we had to break up for school. Again, I'll just give you 1 minute, very, very quickly, fill out the acronym. Off you go. I'm just going to chuck in an arrow for you as well, because we know that one of our acronyms links very, very closely to FITT. All right, so this is sport and fit, excuse me. All right, but we know off of the O of sport, fit are our other principles of training. So again, you've had 30 seconds. If you've completed it, put in a couple of characteristics if you want. I'm going to be explaining them really, really briefly as well, but it is just a quick recap knowledge test. Okay, so roughly a minute there. I'm going to start going through them. If you've not completed them, keep going, but I'm just going to get them up on the screen now. All right, so start with specific. All right, so it needs to be specific to the sport, specific to the actual skill that they're learning, and specific to the components of fitness. That is the really important part. Okay, progression. I'm going to talk about that in a moment because it's not quite just progression anymore. So overload. We know that these two now are pretty much linked. All right, it's now called progressive overload rather than just progression and just overload. When we go across to overload, we've then got our FITT. All right, so frequency, how many times you are training. Okay, intensity, how hard you are training, time, how long you are training for. Okay, and type. Right, so the different types of training that you are doing. Okay, if we then flip back to our last one, R, all right, should have had reversibility. Oh, there we go, reversibility. Okay, so that is our recap task completed. We're now going to move on to the main part of the lesson. So if I just move my screen over now, and I'm just going to bring in what we are going to need to learn about today. So this is ultimately what I'm going to be going through. You can see it on your screen here. All right, altitude training. Very, very simple topic. It's probably not going to be a particularly long lesson. All right, but you can see on your screen predominantly AO1 with an AO3, all right, but there is an AO2 that falls quite nicely into this topic anyway. It's relatively obvious as we go, all right, but our AO1s, what is meant by altitude training? That's ultimately the definition. Knowledge of the physiology whilst at altitude, so what happens to the body when we're at altitude, what do we gain from going up there, and then knowledge of the benefits when we return to sea level. So what are we going to get when we come back down from altitude? Do we get the benefits that we're looking for? The AO2, all right, it's not necessarily on the screen, all right, but that is who or what sports benefit the most from taking part in altitude training, and then you go into your AO3, so the evaluation of who would use altitude training with reasoned conclusions. So the AO2 links in very nicely there. Who's going to use it the most? Do you benefit from it? Are there drawbacks or limitations of taking part in altitude training as well? So let's have a little look at what, we don't want to be doing that at the moment, have a little look at what altitude training actually is. So on your screen, there is quite a big clue as to what altitude training is. Right? Altitude training is very much linked to height. You can see there is a mountainous range on your screen, and I've just circled it, but you need to be going to areas that are, and this is how we say it as part of our definition, 2,000 meters above sea level. Right, above sea level. Okay, so whenever we talk about altitude training, you must talk about travelling to areas that are 2,000 meters above sea level. The Pyrenees, you can go across to America, places like California are quite popular in terms of training camps for elite athletes, various other areas. It's not like just going to the cliffs and saying I'm up high. Okay, you need to be travelling to places where there are large mountainous ranges. Okay, along with this, right, there is also, or this training also involves a physiological adaptation. Okay, I quite like this term. All right, I want to say it's one of my favourite terms that I have throughout this course. All right, but physiological adaptations occur. All right, and that physiological adaptation is ultimately an increase in red blood cells. Okay, red blood cells. So when you are going to be talking about this is very simply our AO1. All right. Altitude training, 2,000 meters above sea level, physiological adaptations occur. That physiological adaptation is the increase in the red blood cells. All right. Always associated with going somewhere where it's very high in those mountainous ranges. Okay. Now, to talk about that physiological adaptation so we understand how it actually happens. It's relatively simple, all right, but I'm going to explain it in quite a crude, simple term. This is not exactly how it happens, all right, but if we have a little look at, let's say, normal. I'm going to call it normal, all right, but normal for us is below 2,000 meters. All right, I'm going to use 3 blood cells. Okay, now, below 2,000 meters, all right, plenty of oxygen available in the atmosphere, okay, for us to take advantage of. We've got so many red blood cells that can take advantage of this. Okay, so we'll take in oxygen, we perform normally, all right, it's not a problem at all for us, we can breathe normally, and we go about our daily lives and exercise as normal. Now, when you go to altitude, so above 2,000 meters, obviously you can go much higher than that, but the higher you go, the harder it becomes. All right, we still travel with that same amount of red blood cells. So I'm just using 3 as an example at the moment. Now the issue we have here, all right, is there is not quite as much oxygen for us to take advantage of. That makes the work that we do very, very difficult. All right, it makes our training much harder. And it actually means when you acclimatise to going up to altitude, sometimes you might actually lose your level of fitness initially because you cannot work as hard as you have done previously, right? Because there's just not enough oxygen, and you fatigue much quicker, you have to work much harder, you reach your anaerobic training zone much quicker, and that has an issue because you're trying to work on your aerobic training zone. All right, so you've got to think about your fitness actually may be lost at this point initially when you're acclimatizing to altitude. Now, what our body does, all right, is this physiological adaptation. Now, we are still 2,000 meters up. What your body will do is it will produce more red blood cells. Okay, so let's say we've now got 5 rather than 3. What this does is this means we can actually take advantage of the lack of oxygen in the atmosphere. All right, so there is still a lack of oxygen in the atmosphere up there or in the air. Okay, but because we've got more red blood cells, it means we can take in more oxygen, all right, and deliver it around the body and work. All right, this process takes about 3 to 4 weeks. Okay, so we've got to think this is not a quick process. It's about 3 to 4 weeks for it to fully happen. All right, now we will still find it difficult to train. Now, the key to altitude training is actually what happens when you come back from altitude training. Okay, so if you have a little look here, all right, we've gone from our normal, or if we go back to our normal, so let's say we are now below 2,000 meters, we have still got our extra red blood cells. But what we now have is there is more oxygen to take advantage of. So we can now get more oxygen into the body quicker, which means we can then work much harder because we're delivering oxygen to the working muscles that need it the most, and they will not fatigue as quickly as they would before. All right, so we are just increasing our oxygen carrying capacity. So, little task that I now want you to get on with. On the screen there is about to appear 4 pictures. I'll just bring them into shot. Okay, so 4 pictures, you can see them on your screen. I just want you to think about and jot down a few notes. Which athletes that you can see here would benefit the most from altitude training? Now we know what altitude training is. Which athletes would benefit the most from that 3 to 4 weeks preparation? Can be longer, but that 3 to 4 week preparation before a big event, how would that help them? How would it benefit them? All right, and if you think it would, you need to justify your answer. Right? If you think it wouldn't, I also want you to justify your answer. Let's just be clear as well what these are. All right, so just so we're under no illusion as to what we're looking at here, all right, we have a football player. All right, so football, gymnast. You could say any gymnast, all right, for now, because the picture is of someone doing the rings. We'll say it's the rings. All right, this is a long distance runner. Okay, and this is discus. Okay, so I'm just going to give you 1 minute or so. Who would benefit from this and why, or who wouldn't benefit this and why? Okay, off you go. So think about the sports, think about the type of sports, think about the energy systems that they might be using. You've had about 30 seconds so far. Okay, let's start discussing these then. So, if we go really quickly on who should or who shouldn't, or who would benefit the most and who wouldn't. So, what I would hope you've gone for is you could argue, and we'll talk about this in a minute, that football players may benefit from this, but we'll talk about that a little bit more when we go into more detail. Gymnast, absolutely not. Long distance runner, but could be long distance anything, yes. Discus or athletics in general in terms of the throwing or jumping events, no. Okay, then I did ask you to just justify your answer and think about it a little bit. So the argument with football is if they did that 3 to 4 weeks preparation at altitude, they would gain the benefit short term. All right, you could argue that this is a 90-minute game. Okay, 90-minute game, which means they would benefit from the reduced fatigue or the fatigue happening later on in the game due to the altitude training. All right, they do use their aerobic energy systems quite a lot. All right, but it's only a slight argument. You wouldn't necessarily say footballers are going to go and train at altitude, right, but they may to get some small benefits. Gymnast and discus, I'm going to treat them as the same thing. They are short, sharp, explosive sports. They work anaerobically most of the time, very short. They would not benefit at all from doing altitude training. There will be no point those athletes going up to altitude to train. It is not going to help them. If anything, they're going to lose a level of fitness because they're up there, and then they'll come back down and the benefits will not help them. Mo Farah or a long distance runner, they are going to benefit the most. Endurance events, Okay, endurance events are the main type of athletes, and it's mainly elite athletes rather than your everyday average Joe runner. All right, but endurance athletes are those that are going to be benefiting the most from taking part in altitude training prior to an event. So we are going to focus on our long distance endurance event. So obviously I've got running on the screen. All right, I'm just going to scroll down to our next explanation. So on your screens you will see this man, Eliud Kipchoge. All right, he's the man that ran under 2 hours in the marathon quite recently, and what we're not going to do is necessarily focus on him, but we are going to focus on the fact that we're going to assume that he probably trained at altitude for this event. So he probably went away for the 3 to 4 week process, could have been even longer. All right, so good 6 to 8 weeks. He's then come down prior to his event, probably 7 days or so, and to get the benefits from that altitude training. Now, what are the benefits to him specifically as a runner? So our obvious ones, okay, are that he gets the benefit of that increased, I'm just going to put RBC, okay, but increased red blood cell count. Okay, in turn, all right, that is also going to help increase his O2 carrying capacity, which is what we're going up there for. Now, those are our simple benefits. That doesn't show us impact, that's just the physiological adaptations that occur. Now, what impact is that going to have on him as a runner is what we need to look at in terms of a reasoned conclusion. So, what we can say is because of the above, he is going to be able to run, very simply, all right, he's going to be able to run for longer. Just to start off with, run for longer. All right, so any person that's done altitude training going to be able to run for longer because fatigue takes much longer to kick in because of the amount of oxygen getting delivered to the working muscles efficiently. All right, on the same note, he is going to be able to run at a higher intensity for longer. All right, so higher intensity for longer. Okay. What impact is that then going to have on him? Ultimately, that is going to decrease his time or his running time, which equals PBs. And that did happen for him because obviously he went under 2 hours in the marathon. Now, what other benefits might that have for him? You're thinking about things like he might be able to make a breakaway. All right, so break away from the pack. All right, break away, and people might not be able to cope with him. All right, he might be able to run faster in the last stages, all right, or the later stages of the race. All right, run faster later stages. Okay, and ultimately, all right, the end goal is what impact? All right, there's a chance, all right, an increased chance of winning. If he's getting quicker times, there's an increased chance of him winning that event. All right, what you can see there, all right, is that there's lots and lots of impact. All right, so we've got the benefits of the red blood cell count, we've got the benefits of the O2 carrying capacity, but it's more about the impact. This is RAO3 now. What impact does this have on this person? And it doesn't matter whether it's a long distance runner, long distance cycler, swimmer, all of these impacts are the same. All right, swim for longer, cycle for longer, cycle at higher intensity. Any of those issues should not be a problem. All right, but we've also got to look at what the limitations are of altitude training, because we've got the benefits. What are the limitations? It's not all 100% positive. So first of all, as I said earlier, all right, you can actually lose fitness. Okay, lose fitness initially. All right, so initially. So when you are acclimatizing, stated that writing, I do apologise, chaps, it's like watching me on a whiteboard like normal. Okay, so lose fitness initially when you're going up to altitude training to acclimatise. All right, so your initial burst, you might have some issues with training as hard as you can because there's lack of oxygen, which means you might lose your initial levels of fitness. Okay. Along with that, when you go up to altitude, your body has to respond to the lack of oxygen. Sometimes that may cause altitude sickness. Okay, so altitude sickness. Okay, so that's going to affect your training time. All right, so it limits your training time. which means if you're going up there for a 3 to 4 week program and you suffer from altitude sickness, it may actually decrease the benefits that you're going to get from that program. Okay, linked loosely to that as well, traveling. All right, because you have to go to places that have 2,000 meters or above. All right, usually that means traveling quite a distance. All right, so that makes altitude training expensive. All right, so your average Joe who's not sponsored by certain teams or can't afford to, won't go there. All right, it is reserved for your elite athletes that are really trying to push the boundaries, but it is expensive due to travel. Okay, very, very expensive. All right, and then you also got to think about the benefits. They are short term. All right, benefits are short term and they are lost very, very quickly. All right, so within 7 to 14 days, short term. Okay, benefits, let me just put it in there, benefits lost quickly. All right, so you spend that 3 to 4 weeks or even longer up at altitude, you come back, you've got about 7 to 14 days maximum where you are going to get the benefits from the altitude training that you've got. All right, so you've got to think about those reasoned conclusions. Is it worth all that effort to get up there, all right, for that short period of time? Are you going to lose time due to altitude sickness? Are you going to lose your initial fitness due to that acclimatization? Is it more beneficial to just stay and work harder at home or in your home training zone rather than go to altitude? That's an argument you can have within an evaluation question, but you see many athletes do this. So I think the benefits probably outweigh the limitations in this scenario. Okay, right, so let's have a little look at some exam style questions though. Let me just bring them into the screen for you now. There is 5 questions in total. All right, now we're not going to do all 5 within this lesson. We've answered a lot of those questions already, but I do want you to do one question here. You can pause it. I'm going to give you 3 or 4 minutes just to complete it. All right, in fact, let's do 2 questions. So let's do the 2 middle questions. One that says explain why athletes such as marathon runners may choose to spend time at altitude, and then what are the potential problems associated with altitude training. So 2 3-mark questions. Think about exam technique as you're answering them. I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that. Pause the video at this point so you can answer the questions, and then I'll go through them once you've answered them. Okay? Right, so let's go through these questions. So if we have a little look at exam technique, first of all, it's an explain question. All right, it's already given us context in terms of marathon runners. That's that long distance scenario that I was talking about before. It's always going to be talking about long distance events if you are being asked on the benefits of it. All right, and it's asking us why might someone who is a marathon runner or a long distance event choose to train at altitude. All right, very, very simple. You start off with your facts. So you should have increased RBC. Oh, this will go a little bit funny here now. RBC. Should also have increased O2 capacity. I'm just going to put increased O2. All right. Then, why might they do that? Okay, higher intensity. Increased chance of winning. And it's pretty crucial here that don't just put increased chance of winning. All right, it's due to, it's that due to scenario, due to being able to run quicker, being able to run at a higher intensity. All right, due to fatigue not taking quite as long. Okay, so due to running quicker. All right, so you've got your AO1s in there linked to the marathon runner. So red blood cell count, O2 capacity would be some marks, and then he can run at a higher intensity, increases his chance of winning due to being able to run quicker. All right, I'll just add in there. All right, so the reduction of time. Just very quickly, just a thought. I don't think we put it in our notes, but I'm just going to go back very, very slightly. If I just go back into here, okay, just remember another benefit, okay, is fatigue slower? I did talk about it, all right, but we didn't write it down. Okay, so let's go back to our next exam question. All right, so what are the problems associated? I went through that in the last bit. So it's 3 marks there, and it's just a what question. This is an AO1. This is a very simple AO1 question. You don't even need to do full sentences here. Okay, all you really need to do is name the issues. All right, so it's a what question. What are the problems? So straight away, expensive, sickness. You need to put altitude sickness, but I'm just going to write sickness. Okay, fitness lost initially. Oh, lost. Pen's having a bit of a mare here. Initially, okay, benefits lost quickly. All right, so it's short term. Okay, so hopefully you've managed to answer those questions well. Now, what I want you to do for your homework, all right, if I just scroll out here very quickly. Oh, where are we? So if I just scroll out. So I want you to make sure for homework that you have completed all of the questions that are currently on your screen. Okay, we've already done 2 of them, so it won't take you long, but you've got the 1 marker and the 2 marker there, and then you've got 2 slightly more difficult questions to think about. So altitude training is used by some marathon runners as part of physiological preparation. Discuss whether altitude training always benefits the marathon runner. All right, I'll give you a tiny little hint on this question. Remember, it is a discuss question, so we now know, all right, from the work we did just before we broke up, that you can split that into yes and no. It is a discuss question. You can't just put bullet point. Well, you can bullet point it now. All right, make sure they're sentences, but does it benefit or does it not benefit is what I'll be looking for in that question. All right, and then within your booklets, you have got this 9 marker. So Rachel is a 19-year-old athlete. She's recently qualified for the Under-20 World Championship in the 10K. She has been offered some funding to support her training and has considered undertaking some altitude training. She is deciding between whether this or competing at local competitions in the lead up to championships. Evaluate the benefits of missing these local events and undertaking a training program at altitude as she prepares for the championships. Okay, so I want you to do that 9 marker in your work booklets. All right, these need to be completed. All these questions need to be completed, whether it's online or whether you do it by paper. I don't mind. Okay, and then you need to submit them to me at the end once you've completed, and I'll give you 1 week to complete that set of questions. Right, chaps, so that is the end of video lesson 1. I hope you found it beneficial. It is a new way of working for me as for you, so it'll take a little bit of adjusting. I promise my handwriting will get better as I get more used to doing it in this way. What you now need to do, you need to complete the exam questions. So it's 2 1 markers and the 4 and the 9 marker that I explained a moment ago. You then need to take a photo of your lesson notes, your lesson tasks, and the questions that you have completed. You then need to email me those pictures to my school email address. That's one way of submitting the work. The other way is if you want to do it online. Okay, I've set this up in Teams as an assignment. So the paper 1 work booklet questions are all on Teams as an assignment. You just need to log in, complete them online. You then email me to tell me that you have completed the questions on assignments, and I will go in and I will mark them for you. As I've said, hopefully you found it beneficial. The next lesson will be another short lesson actually on seasonal aspects of training. Take care, chaps.